Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Hordes Dairyman monthly webinar series. My name is Abby Bauer, and I'm an editor for Hordes Dairyman magazine. I want to thank you for joining us for this webinar, which is titled The Factors That Help Deluur Dairy Excel at Transition Cow Care. Today's presentation will feature somewhat of a virtual farm tour of Deluur Dairy, which is located near Deckerville in the thumb of Michigan. The farm's owner, Hendrik Eggink, and his friend and veterinarian, Dr. Mark Fox, will lead us through a conversation about the steps they take to provide high-quality care for cows during the transition period. If you have any questions for our presenters, feel free to type those into the questions section of that GoToWebinar control panel, and we will address them after the presentation. Now, it is my honor to introduce to you our speakers. Hendrik Eggink and his wife, Anne-Marie, moved to the United States in September of 2002, and they started milking their first cows there the next year. Since then, they have grown the dairy to its current size of about 3,300 milking and dry cows. The lactating cows are milked at two separate facilities, with all cows and heifers being calved in at that Deckerville location. Their heifers that are raised for replacements are on a different site, which is called Deluur Future. Hendrik and Anne-Marie have 10 children and 6 grandchildren, and the children that are still living at home all pitch in at the dairy or the heifer raising facility in a variety of ways. Dr. Mark Fox received his DVM degree from Michigan State University's College of Veterinary Medicine in 1984 and has practiced in the thumb of Michigan for 38 years. He's part of Thumb Veterinary Services, which is a predominantly large animal practice with 11 doctors, and they have a heavy emphasis on dairy production medicine services. Dr. Fox has a strong interest in nutrition, milk quality, reproductive programs, and dairy welfare, and is an active member of several professional veterinary organizations. Mark and his lovely wife, Jane, have 3 married children and 8 grandchildren. Some of you might recognize Dr. Fox's name, as he also serves as one of our authors for the Cowside Practice column that runs in Hordes Dairyman magazine, and we are very thankful for the stories and expertise he shares with the readers of Hordes Dairyman. Hendrik and Dr. Fox, thank you for joining us. I'm really looking forward to learning more about the good things that are happening at Deluur Dairy. Go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you, Abby. This is Dr. Mark, and yeah, we feel honored to be able to take part in just the webinar today with transition cows. And like what you mentioned, I've known Hendrik and his family since they came here 22 years ago, nearly. So a great friend and colleague, and a wonderful dairy family. And he's been a pleasure and a joy to work with. And he's here in our office, so we're doing this at the practice office. So we're both sitting here kind of collectively together, and we're just excited, very excited to share about transition cows. It's a passion of mine. It's been a passion of mine for quite some time. The whole dairy welfare arena has a lot of moving parts to it, but certainly the transition cow and her baby is of big importance. So yeah, we're really excited. So I hope my intent is I got a lot of slides. We have a lot of slides from Hendrik's farm, and so it's going to be a kind of a virtual farm tour in a sense. We're going to tag team. Hendrik and I will tag team back and forth as we present, as things come up on the slide. He's obviously the engineer and the dairy farmer, and I'm the veterinarian, and I look through the eyes of the cow oftentimes. So I hope it's enjoyable for you. We love doing farm visits and farm tours. We typically will take a day in the spring and jump on a bus and go from farm to farm. And so just kind of sit back in the seat and think of this as you're getting off the kindness bus, and we're just coming up to Hendrik's farm, and we're just going to spend 45 minutes or so walking through the facilities. So kind of in an outline, I would say that we'll start. My idea was to start with the pre-fresh on the pre-fresh cows and heifers. We're going to talk about the environment and the barn design. We're going to touch on the importance of adequate nutrition. And then we're going to move kind of through the life cycle of the cow. So as we get close to calving, we're going to talk about maternity pens and handling facilities. Calving and colostrum harvests are important, so we'll spend some time on that as well. And obviously part of the transition is getting a healthy newborn replacement. So we'll spend some time on the newborn calf facilities and management. And then certainly we'll transition to fresh cows themselves. So the fresh cows themselves give us kind of a report card, so to speak, on how we've done thus far during the dry period and pre-fresh. So we'll talk about that with some technology that Hendrik has invested in here in the last several years. And then we'll talk a little bit about some metrics and some dairy welfare issues, everything from animal stewardship to antimicrobial stewardship. And so, yeah, hopefully it'll be a kind of a whirlwind. We won't let the dust settle on your coffee cup. I wish you were here in person because I'm very much a visual kind of a learner, and my communication style is such that I like to be face to face, and yeah, that's the way I do it. So we'll make the best of the screen and the pictures. I will have you. There'll be some times when I'm going to bring a slide up, and I'm going to have a noticeable pause, or I'll ask a question with a few seconds delay. And my intent is to get you to look at the pictures in a detailed fashion, like what I was taught during pathology classes years back with a tiny little lesion. So we're fortunate to have not only Hendrik here today, but we have Dr. Jared Sanderson. He's a new associate that just joined our practice, and this is literally his first day on the job. So I'm excited to have Jared here. He's the next generation of people that have invested heavily in the dairy industry. So without any further ado, there's the site of Hendrik's facilities. So I'll turn it over to Hendrik for a few minutes.
Good afternoon. Yeah, Hendrik here. I'll just answer the questions that you don't have them on your page. You see the barn there, that's the south side of our transition barn, pre-fresh barn we call it. It was built in the end of 2017 and kind of got opened up the early part of 2018. And I think we'll get some more into that later, but it's always as a dairy was growing, it's always kind of the big question is how big do you make it? And it's a good thing to have, besides yourself, to get some input from other people that don't necessarily have to write the check. Because if the one writing the check wants to keep it maybe cheaper than he should, but it's good to have a balance and a long-term perspective. So we didn't spare a lot of money, as you'll see later, but I believe it pays itself back very quick, especially as we saw the results once we moved into this barn. It's a 4-row barn where all our other barns are actually 6-row barns. There it is, and it'll have calving pens on both in the front of these barns that you can't see. We'll get to those later. It's a traditional, no bells and whistles barn, other than a bunch. We got a lot of fans in them, but you can see the feed rails. There's no headlocks in there. It's a 4-row barn. We just got mechanically ventilated. Besides the fans do their job in the starting now, pretty much at the end of April through early October, and then the rest of the year we work with the curtains on the side to manage the airflow. You can definitely tell that a 4-row barn will create a lot less stale air than a 6-row barn will. So we don't mess with the curtains too much because it takes a little while for that air quality to go bad, where in the 6-row barn it's more crucial to work with the curtains. That's all I got on this one.
Yeah, so like Hendrik mentioned, in my world, in my dream world, I consider myself a veterinarian, but yet I kind of pride myself in being a part-time farmer, meaning that I like to get in Hendrik's checkbook a little bit and have some input as he moves forward. So this is one of those areas we did ponder, we discussed a little bit, and so I think the data, the research, and the evidence has shown more than not, space and rest are huge, and so stocking density and stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit. So yeah, 4-row sand bedded barn. So I will come back to this topic. So I went through in 2014, 2015. I did some training in the Netherlands with Joep Driesen, a veterinarian in a group there, and he's been the start of the Cow Signals program over in Holland, and it's been around the globe for many years now, but as I spent time there, it kind of rekindled my interest, and I've always had interest in cow comfort and what we can do better. But we talked about, in that program, it talks about, and I've mentioned it in my articles in the years past, six freedoms of pasture if we can bring into our modern confinement dairy housing that make the life of the cow and the life of the farmer, to be honest, much better. So here in the Thumb of Michigan, we've been fortunate to have a lot of direction towards virgin sand-bedded barns. And so those six freedoms, again, are air, light, water, feed, rest, and space. And air, light, water, feed, rest, and space. And they're all critical. And sometimes we spend a lot of emphasis on certain areas and we neglect a little bit. But as a dairy veterinarian advisor for about 4 decades, I guess I've been around cows most of my life, these are important areas that really influence dairy welfare.
So the stalls are 54 inches wide. There's two sides to this barn. One side's got pre-fresh heifers, which those stalls are 48 inches wide. These are the mature cows. Those are 54 inches wide, and they're head-to-head stalls. They're 8 foot long. If it would have been an outside roll, we probably would have made them 9 foot long. But they're super spacious, and so we got an independent suspended rail that you can see there. It's where we have some other barns we put them in since, and I really like that design. So yeah, it works good for us.
You can see from this picture the cows and dry cows. Hendrik does have big cows, and hopefully one of my mantras as I get into my later chapters in my career is that I think we talk about how old is an old cow or how young is a young cow, but I think there's certainly room in most of our industry for getting another lactation or two. And I'm a kind of a big believer in that. Part of it is economics, but really part of it is just back to the dairy welfare part. I think our cows are aged oftentimes by what we do as managers, more so than the biological nature of the cow. And so the diseases that are present in most of our modern dairy cows around the globe tend to be, they're related to hindrances. And so as we look at these newer facilities, it goes a long ways. But as you can see in the picture here, the cows want to stretch out. So those of you that have been around cows all your life, you look and I pause and say, what do you see in there? Well, you see a lot of cows that are stretched out with their legs going every which way. A lot of times cows will put their one front leg on the upside will be extended out over the brisket locator up underneath of their free stalls. I guess the point is that they're big cows. They want and deserve a lot of space. And typically, the more we provide for them, the better. Again, another picture of the same. So, yeah, virgin stall beds. You can see looking across the barn, there's empty stalls. I was sneaking in here that day, taking some pictures. But yeah, a lot of occupancy here. But cows want to be stretched out. Again, more of the same. So one of the management points that we see when we have farms that are used to 6-row barns and maybe stocking densities that are fairly aggressive, all the stalls are really important. And in these barns, the transition barns, if we do what I say adequately stock, let's say stock at 80 or 90% occupancy, the stalls will have a tendency in sand-bedded stalls, they have a tendency to get a little lumpy on the stalls that aren't used. And so I think grooming of these stalls on a weekly basis is important to make sure that the stalls remain 5-star stalls, because if you just allow the sand shooter fella or gal to come in there and fill, you're going to end up by dimensionally, you're going to take stalls out of the equation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Just to get back to the 4-row barns, there's I had feed rail space. I think we're like 300 and some feet of feed alley. So they're well over. I think they're almost 3 foot per cow of feed space, bunk space is I guess the word.
Yep.
So there's no competition on the both in the pre-fresh and post-fresh, as you'll see later. There's we keep them understocked, and then the rest you get away if you get those two parts right, you'll be able to get away with a few other issues down the road where you maybe overstock your other barns. But if you get these two phases right, I think you'll have a lot less trouble down the road.
It gets back to the notion on, do we want to treat disease or do we want to prevent disease? And so as a veterinarian, when I was a baby vet, I spent a lot of my efforts and just talking about the treatment and oftentimes the diagnosis and treatment of disease. But as the years rolled along, I realized pretty fast that it's really to be aimed at prevention. So much of what we do can really minimize the effects of transition disease. So as we kind of jump gears from a first step into the barn, now as we dive in a little bit deeper, we'll talk a little on nutrition and management of the pre-fresh heifers and cows. This slide was expanded a little bit by Rhonda when she put the slide on there. So Hendrik's cows, it looks like it's got a really wide head. That's because we distorted the photo just a little bit. So Hendrik does not have goofy looking cows, but this one is distorted a little wide. But my question and my 2-second delay is going to be, what do you see in the slide? Hopefully you've seen that we've got fresh TMR, in this case pre-fresh TMR in front of the cows, and as you've all witnessed every morning and night when you're doing your chores, you see that burrowing down in that TMR to get to whatever goodies they try to get to. So on these diets specifically, sorting is a big issue for dairy cattle. Well, cattle in general, if we think about it, but certainly dairy cattle, when we start bringing in concentrates and really highly palatable parts of their diet, and we bring in forages, in this case dry cow diets that have a lot of, in the Midwest we feed a lot of wheat straw, but sorting is a real issue for us. We'll talk about that. Hendrik can address that.
We add water to the ration to minimize sorting. You'll see in a little bit how we push up the feed, but especially in those diets where they look for stuff that they like to eat rather than the stuff that we want them to eat, they just keep pushing that feed away to search for it. But we keep that feed pushed up. We add water. We chop the straw as fine as we can, and we have the luxury, but there's beet pulp available, like in our part of the country, pretty much unlimited. So it makes that ration, for a dry cow ration, quite palatable because you can actually add a bunch of water through the beet pulp, and it makes that ration just pack enough where it looks like a cow might eat it, and they do. So yeah.
Yeah, those are excellent points. If you're feeding these high straw-based diets or even high grass hay or mixed hay, the point is that you got to make the particle size. You can't get it really too fine. Right. So the days on saying we need long stem straw or long stem hay in there, now the cows will do us more disservice than they will service because they sort the dickens out of it. And then when they're able to sort a diet, their feeding behavior changes at their feed fence. So if they're on a diet where they can sort, the aggressive cows will occupy time at the feed fence, standing on her feet basically, just going through the day-to-day thing on getting out what she loves. It's like me standing in front of my refrigerator when I get home at night. So the more you can make this cow able to, every mouthful is exactly the same. It's really, really important. The other thing that we'll touch on here, even though our subject today was on the transition cow and success, but it really starts before that, and you all know that. So sometimes we've created our own hiccups during the transition time, in my opinion, because we haven't kept a very good handle on body condition during late lactation. And so Hendrik is, in my opinion, from the herds that I service, Hendrik has a fairly kind of a nailed down protocol that he has as far as when to call these cows do not breeds. But this was just a eyeball of just 3, and I was randomly going down the barn that day. So these are just 3 random cows in a transition cow diet. But you can see the cow on the left, I'm guessing, I'm just looking here, but the cow on the left, I would call her maybe a body condition score, maybe 325 or so. The one in the middle, a little heavier, and the one on the right, perhaps just a tick heavier. And that was just a subset of 3. But I would say as an average from the herds that I work with, Hendrik's cows, when they enter this transition period, really when they enter the far-off dry cow period, are probably in my herds, probably about 0.5 to 0.75 less in body condition than a lot of folks. And part of that is Hendrik feeds a fairly aggressive, highly fermentable diet to the lactating cows as well, but he has some criteria that he uses for the DMBs.
We just went through that a little bit more. We went so standard, like a 6 lactation animal or a cow that has twins will become a DNB right out of the gate when they calve in. So I think as dairymen, we kind of tend to, if we make a cow a DNB, we think we're going to sell that cow like next week. But if we wrap our head around it, if we make her a DNB early enough, we can milk that cow probably for 500 days, and she'll kind of keep that milk production pretty steady. And she'll be a nice cow when you sell her, and you'll save a lot of money on trying to get up through off sync and all that kind of, or she becomes pregnant too late, and then you'll end up selling her at 150 days pregnant because she only gives you like 35 or 40 pounds of milk anymore. So we're really trying to get ahead of the game as far as culling goes, where we dictate when a cow gets culled rather than she tells us I need to go. I think that's probably sums it all up a little bit. Yeah, bottom line, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree 100% on that. So on a dairy side, and even as an animal advocate on our dairy industry, we're going to be culling cows off our dairies big time, and we do, and it's needed. Having whatever that number is on your dairy, but I think if we can be in that 25, 30, 35% cull rate and do it sustainably, that's great. I think if we're at 45% or these higher numbers because of broken cows, that's not great. So, and it's very costly. So we'll talk about that in the metrics a little bit, but culling late lactation cows that have performed well, that have a great body condition, they're a tremendous asset to the beef industry. Right. But selling broken cows that have a body condition of 1.5 or 2 after a series of metabolic diseases following calving is not advantageous to anybody, whether it's the farmer or the consumer. Again, we talked about the diet. The diet on the screen here, I just took a handful out, so I'll give a little pause. You tell me the difference. So seconds up. So the one you can see from the previous slide, Hendrik's pre-fresh cows are on the one side of the barn, and pre-fresh heifers are on the other side, including some jerseys. But the diet, the TMR that I put on the feed lane there, on the left is the cows, on the right is the heifers, and you can tell the heifers have the inclusion of a little more haylage. So obviously, from a nutritional standpoint, we don't have to watch the potassium story so much. We tend to have a little higher energy on these pre-fresh heifer diets than what the cows are. So they are in fact different. A lot of dairies and listeners that we might have today, we feel that if you have a separation of dry cows versus heifers, obviously the acidification story, which we won't spend much time on, but the acidification is very applicable to the cows, to where the heifers it typically is not needed, and we can make changes there. And again, this isn't a nutrition webinar, but I am blessed to work with Terry Nobis and his group at Nobis Agra. He's a wonderful nutritionist, does hard work for our dairies and his associates. So this isn't a spec sheet to show off any details, but rather just to emphasize, and we won't look at the numbers, but on the close-up heifers, these are straw-based diets. So corn silage, straw, bean meal, haylage, close-up minerals, and as Hendrik pointed out, we have the advantage here on feeding wet pressed beet pulp pretty much year-round, and that brings us some moisture. Again, it's similar printout for the mature cows, and again, we're not going to get into the details, but we add a lot of water. So you can see on the top there, we actually add 13 pounds of water per head per day on these diets. Corn silage, wet pulp, straw, 9 pounds of straw to these close-up cows, all fine ground, and then the rest of their nutrients. So we shoot for a TMR in these transition diets that are in that 40 to 42% dry matter. So they're wetter than what we were historically used to, but it does a great job on promoting palatability and inability to sort. Again, another look down through Hendrik's barn. I talked about, those 6 freedoms, including 3 of those as lights and fans. And Hendrik, what do you have there? You mentioned it earlier.
LED lights galore displayed is lit. And I think you want that in a pre-fresh barn, because we'll get to that later. So we do in-time calving, so we walk around and looking for pretty much feet to be sticking before we pull them out of the stalls and put them in the straw pen. So we want lots of light. The fans, we went with a 5-blade fan because they're quiet even in summertime, and so that barn is super relaxed. If you want to, as a dairyman, relax on the farm and just to have some peace and get away from the parlor, that barn that you're looking at now is where you want to go, because it's just so peaceful in there. There's only one person kind of working in there, unless there's maybe some movements going on, like half a day a week where stuff needs to be done. But other than that, it's just a very quiet barn, and it just breathes peace. And I think that, like we stated in the beginning, my wife birthed 10 children, and the last thing you want, I think, when you're giving birth is a bunch of ruckus going on. And so yeah, we tried that to do the best we can to bring peace into the picture, and I think we accomplished that.
Yep, and that's huge for me as a veterinarian. I get in a lot of barns, and I like to tour around the countryside in other states and other areas. And so when I walk in transition facilities, it's like the first time maybe a person walks into a robotically milked dairy. What strikes you is just the uncanny quietness and just listening and watching the cows. So totally at rest is huge. That's part of the prevention. Again, Hendrik has some jerseys that are intermixed, and they have to go on the, I'll back up just a minute there. They have to go on this slide. It would be on the right-hand side. So they're intermixed with the Holstein heifers. And you can see on the neck rail there's a double neck rail, and that's to keep the jerseys in. Because as you know, these jerseys, they're always looking for ways to get out, and they're pretty handy at it. So again, understacked on both the heifer side and the cow side.
The cows are about anywhere between. So it moves a little bit depending on how many head we have move into the barn each week. But they should be in that pre-fresh pen anywhere between 16 and 24 days. The cows are, and the heifers are, anywhere from 28 to 35 days pre-fresh. So we try to minimize getting them in there too close to calving. But the date, especially the cow side, does move a little bit to help out with calving peaks. You got to move that sometimes a little bit to alleviate the calving peaks, which is also how we built that barn. It got built with a calving peak in mind. So most, like 9 months out of the year, that barn won't have the stalls won't be 100% full, like 95% out of the time, just to alleviate calving peaks.
Yeah, that's a great comment too. I know Nigel Cook and Garrett Etzel and Ken Norland, the Wisconsin group, we call them, have spent a lot of their career studying transition cows and cow comfort issues. And so to tell a dairy farmer to build a barn where there's going to be empty stalls, it's like for me to go out and buy a new BMW motorcycle. It's something hard to swallow. But this is one of those areas in this stage of their life cycle that it does pay off really well.
That Juno that's about the only robotic thing we have, other than that cow manager tag that you saw earlier. But that was just, I didn't put that in right away, but I did when I built the barn. It was just I'm not saying this thing pays back or whatever, but it was something I had in my vision to add to the piece in the barn. Nobody has to bore around with a skid steer every hour or every 45 minutes to push up that feed. And we've had some troubles with it, especially when somebody hits it with something. They don't like that too well. But other than that, it really adds. It's part of this whole philosophy of trying to push up the feed. That's cows look for to sort through. So the more we can push it up without compacting it too bad, and to keep the piece in the barn, I think this is part of that picture that accomplishes that. And there's other ones besides Lely, so I'm not promoting Lely, but there's something to be said for this in this kind of barn,
Yeah, for sure. And you can see on the far end of the barn there, so we're kind of looking north, excuse me, not looking north to the end of the barn, but you can see this is the feed lane there is a closed end. So there's no mixer wagons, there's no traffic through this barn that would contaminate it with dirt and manure from other parts of the dairy. So having as clean as we can feed fence area is really important. The push-ups are crazy important. And these transition cows, unlike far off dry cows, so if we back up a little bit, and we're not talking about the far off period, but far off dry cows, if you have space and rest available, because we do try to limit their energy intake to about their, just maybe a tick over their requirements. So we can feed the far off side pretty tight. We can feed them to a slick bunk, sometimes even for a couple hours a day if we have space, because we want those cows to be on a low energy diet. Once they enter into these transition facilities, every mouthful that you can get them. So I think we bounce through that those nutrient specs, but I think our pre-fresh heifers are averaging about 26 pounds, and our cows, our pre-fresh cows are about 33 pounds, which is really a good number. It's an excellent number, but that's part of the medicine. That's as important as any vaccination heading prior to calving is dry matter intake. So these things are very, very important.
Foot baths, we got on both sides. There's permanent foot baths. There's a hydrant. You can see that in that wall. There's a hydrant there. I think everybody's watching. The easier you make something, the more you can expect that it gets done. I think so. That's one of those things where we kind of made it as easy as possible to fill these foot baths, to drain them. There's a hole there's a plug there in the far side where you just drain it. So other than an automatic foot bath, I think this is about as easy as you can make it, and make sure it gets done. So if you make it too hard for employees to come, if you got to unroll like 100 foot of hose every time, then they'll tell you they did it, but they probably didn't. And it is critical to get it done, because they're away from foot baths for about 6, 7, or 8 weeks after they go into the dry cow period. And to not run foot baths for us is not. You can tell right away if you skip a week or two. Sometimes in the really cold weather we have to skip it, and it shows up right away. So it's a vital part of a barn like this to keep their foot health in order. And the people that walk these barns looking for cows that calve also look for limping cows. So once a week when the hoof trimmer comes, those cows would get pulled out. But there's very few. We're on a pretty tight maintenance hoof trim maintenance program as well. But you'll have the odd limper, so they go to the hoof trimmer even pre-calving, because a cow on 3 legs, it's not going to end well post-fresh at all.
No. Right, I would agree. Lameness in a dry cow, lameness in any cow is a terrible disease, but lameness during the dry period is almost a death sentence when they come fresh. So it's crazy important. And as you can notice here, so the length of that foot bath would be getting back to the Wisconsin group. So we know we need them long and narrow, so you don't have to use a pile more chemicals, but having multiple dips. Right. This bath would, from the inside of that bath, would be about 12 feet, I'm guessing, for length. So. Yep. Plenty long. And then the other thing to notice is on our waters, a lot of the newer facilities, we put their waters on concrete pedestals, or you want to get them up in the air, and you can see from the line on the manure about how far the splatter goes up. And so this is an attempt, and when I first started seeing waters going up in the air, I started wondering how the cows were actually going to drink in them. But believe me, they drink in them, and having clean water is one of our 6 freedoms.
Yeah, swing gates. So that again is easy. As the people walk through the barn to look for cows that are calving, they'll drop those gates down, put a clip on them so they can't swing back up. There's a counterweight on them. They're really easy to swing. There's a polyurethane bushing there where they spin, so they're super quiet. So the cows hardly know you're walking through there. I really didn't want any gates to swing and make a bunch of noise as the hinges get dry. These things you don't hear them when you spin them. And yeah, it's a great design. Everything is laid out. It's a one-man show in there, so everything we tried to think through, like, can one person do this? And I think we accomplished that for the most part fairly good. Lots of room. Yeah, lots of room there. Probably a little bit too much. The idea was, and maybe still is, if you look at the curtains on the very right side of the picture, you could mirror this barn and go the other way and have that scrape trench in the middle, and then the door you're looking at would maybe go to like a milking parlor or whatever. Right now that's not there because we got the parlors further away, but it's just kind of made so we could in the future add on without major reconstruction. So that's why this looks a little bit maybe too spacious, but yeah, just to be prepared.
Yep. Yeah, so this would be the end of the barn as they push the manure off there. And then the lower left-hand corner, you'll see, and I took the picture looking for the manure storage, but there's a big pile, not a big pile, but there's several 100 pounds of push-outs that when they clean these mangers, they will run a skidder up in there against that wall and dump out any remaining TMR from the feeding before. So again, you don't want, just don't run these cows out of feed. You should always have some refusals that still look like feed. So we'll jump gears now as we get closer to parturition, and we'll talk about the maternity pens and facilities. So as Hendrik mentioned, this is a cow, and again, there was all of her herd mates. As I took the picture the day I was in there, middle part of the day, but her herd mates were all kind of down to the left of this picture in the other end of the barn. But I took it to emphasize the importance that cows want to be isolated in a sense when they initiate parturition. If it's down in Florida, if they're in 6-foot Bermuda grass, they're going to want to be isolated. And if they're in facilities, they tend to hawk themselves away prior to parturition. So these are some of the things that the helpers, the chore people there, take advantage of and to initiate that.
The barns get walked about every half hour to 45 minutes. The maternity person, we call it, will walk through the barns, take a rake with them, clean the stalls as they go, and then they'll walk a cow like that. They'll try to get her up and walk her towards where they can sort her out and put her in the straw pen. Yep.
Hendrik alluded to it earlier, but just to mention it too, I think as the dairy managers have to be cognizant of your helpers, because when everybody gets into these slugs of calvings, and so sometimes if the barn is full, let's say we're going through one of those periods of time where this week is going to be crazy busy on calvings, if you have a little flexibility there to not overcome your workforce, because they do have a big task on hand. They have a lot of tasks to do in the barn here.
Calving pens, we have 3 good-sized calving pens. I think they're like 30 by maybe 50 even, with headlocks in them. We can isolate. I think one of the next pictures you'll see one cow licking the other. If that becomes a problem, we can move that cow to the next pen so they leave each other alone. But for the most part, if they're content and laying down and not bothering each other too much, we just leave them be. And since I'm not there that much, I tend to almost go there more than, I would jump in sooner than my experienced help does now. So I kind of, and it work. We have good results, so I just watch them do it, and it works great. We think a cow just wants to deliver calves by themselves. And as we looked at body condition, it's all everything's so connected. If you keep the body condition under control, those calves will come out by themselves, unless there may be breech or feed. We'll have some picture later about that. But body condition is everything from getting them pregnant to calving them in. It paints the picture of the farm and how successful you will be. It shows on body condition of cows in barns, how well this is going to end, or start, I should say, maybe. Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. And as Hendrik mentioned in his bio, Abby mentioned that he's a father of 10. So Anne Marie, I know his wife very well. So for the first 3 babies, he was kind of nervous at times during labor. But now in these last 3 or 4, it's like he still does chores. So being a little more passive and relaxing nature does a lot of well. I want you to look in the slide, and again, I'll give you just a second or two to say, give me little things that you see. One of the things, obviously, there's multiple cows in labor here, big straw pens. So again, it gets back to the cleanliness thing. So remember, these cows are going to exit their sterile environment that they've been in for 9 months, and they're going to hit the ground running almost, in a sense. And so we can spend a lot of straw, and it's way cheaper than medication, vaccination. Not that all that stuff is not important, it is. But boy, the old adage, cleanliness next to godliness, really carries true in these transition facilities. The other thing I want you to make note of is in the back of this pen, the second pen back, so all the way against there, you'll see a cement wall. And Hendrik put that in there for one of his reasons, and it was unbeknownst to me, but the more I observed freshening animals, they hunker in behind that. So again, that's like a curtain to isolate them from the rest of the herd. So just past that cement wall is the rest of that pre-fresh pen that some of these animals just came out of. So they're used to the facilities. Now there's a cement wall there, in a sense, blocking the maternity pens from the freestall barn. I think that's critical. And I think it's very advantageous to giving these animals some time for isolation where they're not being peered at by 100 other cows.
And even next to the cement walls, there's 2 gates to get into the scrape alleys. Those gates, we put actually plywood boards up. So, and it goes both ways, because you don't want cows, if cows in that pre-fresh pen see little calves, they all come running up and bellowing, so we really try to block the view. So for both the animal, for the one that's calving, so she thinks she's on her own, and for the other ones not to just stand there all day looking at calves being born and just not relaxing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And just the layout of our simple handling facilities. So here we have just a swing gate and a simple headlock there.
Right.
So by having a swing gate, but it's important that you put these things in the right spots. I've been around this thing long enough and tried to design them myself at times, but they have to be able to see cows on the other side. If you put it up close to a dead end, even though you might have 3 or 4 feet above it, or even a manger, boy, it's a lot tougher than if they were to swing a gate and if they could see daylight, and more importantly than daylight, if they could see their herd mates on the other side there. It gives them quite a sense of peace, and they're just way less amped up when you go to do anything with them. So again, mothers love other mothers, and so the one on the left, I know because I was there that day, hadn't freshened yet, but she had feet hanging out. So yeah, this takes us back. So they will help out with each other, but you can see from the pen behind it, there's 3 pens here, and they typically have lots and lots of space. Progression. So as we mentor the help on the farm, as veterinarians anyways, we talk about progression, not perfection, makes us happy. And so this is one of the classic examples during the laboring cows. So standing back at a distance and teaching and mentoring our helpers to stand back at a distance, and if they're progressing, let nature take its course. Most of the time when we get in the way, it goes bad for the cow, the calf, and ourselves. So they're coming out of the sterile environment, and what is their new home look like? Halfway out, she's doing fine. I wanted to stay out of her way.
Yeah, so this is a great for to train. So we're constantly training people to work in these barns and to make sure that you want to be flexible and not have a phone call like I'm not coming in or I'm sick. You want to have somebody to fill that spot. So we're constantly training people to be able to work in that barn. And this is one of the tools that really helps to when they reach into a cow, when we train them, it's like, okay, what are you feeling? And even night before last night, I got a phone call and the guy just shot me a picture of like, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you come and help? And I actually sent somebody else to help, but that's neither here nor there. But it's just such a nice tool to have to picture what's going on inside that cow without actually going in. And it is weird when you've never reached into a cow. You kind of you don't you don't know the front from the back, and it all feels weird. So if you have a visual, I think it really helps to get people to get comfortable with what's going on in that cow as good as they can from the outside.
No, I agree. Visual, and we like to have calving schools sometimes where we bring either people to the office, or we've had them at Hendrik's barn before too. We have calving schools, go through some of the mechanics of a really good exam, and stressing the importance of being clean when we do have to help. So it's critical for this success. So calving schools are important, hands-on, and I found at least for the individuals that love working with cows and calves, they want to improve their skills. And so it's important for them to get some feedback from ourselves as advisors and from the owners give them some encouragement and give them some tools and education that would help them get better.
Yeah, so protocols, we have a lot of protocols, and I think we probably don't update them enough, but these are pretty accurate. It really helps to bring across the importance of them, but also to kind of to point everybody's going to be on the same page, I think, is what we're after, and to not give them an excuse like I didn't know. We go over these protocols with the people that we train and have them ask questions, and I think they're understandable. Yeah, I think as the dairy got bigger, the need for protocols got more and more important, and I think even on smaller dairies, it is important to have them, just so that everybody does the same thing, and so that even if you talk to your veterinarian or some other nutritionist or whatever, you can actually have it in front of you, like, hey, this is what we're doing. What do you think? Should it be tweaked? And it needs, every once in a while it needs to be tweaked. This is not perfect, but at least you got something to work off and work with. And yeah.
Everyone has to enter the dairy on the same page and have some of these protocols in front of them so that they do their best on complying with them. Mm-hmm. And again, these are more protocols we won't spend in the nature of time. We won't spend a ton of time on some of these, but it's important to everything from newborn to the fresh cows, all that stuff kind of be written down and then adjusted and tweaked as needed. Spelling out the details. More on the facilities. This is where the colostrum is harvested. So as Hendrik mentioned, on the right-hand side, there's a plywood board there, kind of a curtain as I call it. So you want to block the vision. We got a swing gate that they can use very easily with a self-lock there. And they can see cows ahead of them. And that's really, really important for them to be able to do this stuff one person.
So we put them in the headlock, and there's another one next to it. If you go to the next picture, Mike, it's kind of like we call it a double barrel. So if you happen to have two cows calving at the same time, they go in the headlock, and there's just a bucket milker there. All the cows in that barn that calf and the heifers, they get milked once. The colostrum gets harvested. The cow gets treated in those headlocks, and it's like I said before, it's all designed so that one person, and it's not just guys, there's actually more ladies there too. My daughter being one of them, and one of the girls that's later on in the picture being one of them. They're very important, but they can handle this. They can work that gate and squeeze that cow, and just without a bunch of, I don't want to mention, but like we don't have a hot rod on our farm. There's no prodding or whatever going on other than that gate, squeezing that gate, and that cow will move forward. Sometimes you have to maybe put the cow. All the gates swing. All the gates you've seen in this picture, they swing. So you can put a cow in front of that headlock. If you really can't, a calf, if you really can't get the mother through, you can put the calf in front and she'll come through it then. So, like I said, everything is designed to be a one-man show or a one-girl show.
And that's crazy important because we're talking about lowering stress, right? So we all know that stress, whether it's an acute stress or these chronic ongoing stressors, more and more we learn they're can be almost the foundations for some of these metabolic diseases. The other thing I'll point out in the picture is on the right-hand side there against the wall is a sled, okay? That's for sledding out calves as needed. My buddy Joop Driesen in Holland, he devised what he calls a cuddle box, and it has higher walls, and you can put them on wheels. You can use even something like a Rubbermaid tub on wheels, workforce tub, where you can actually, like Hendrik mentioned, if you were to place that newborn calf right at the time of calving in a cuddle box, and place it in front of the self-lock while you're trying to harvest colostrum, everything gets easier. It really works. It's kind of a novel thing. Most people don't do it. If they try it, I think you'll see that it can be helpful. So harvesting colostrum, like Hendrik mentioned, we have a bucket milker there. Everything has to be clean.
Yeah, so we it's a stand it's almost like a stanchion. We got a vacuum pump there. Just a bucket milker. The protocol says clean it after every calving, and if they have to, we let them get away with that. But if there's more than 15 minutes between calvings, stuff needs to be cleaned. There's hot water available. Goes back again to how easy can you make it, so that everything is right there. They can run that milker, put the vacuum. There's multiple vacuum lines, so they can just put vacuum through it and suck water with detergent in it and clean the equipment that way. Same with colostrum. The colostrum bags, we have those other perfect bags. they don't give those away, but I think it's one other tool just to keep everything as sterile as possible and not contaminating stuff. So works for us.
Yep. You can't get too clean. Even the esophageal feeders,
Right.
all the bottles, everything you see there it's important to detail. It's got to be clean. And that's just a picture of the old Jersey cow. It's everybody's best friend, sitting in there quietly being milked. So that's what we want. You could have her baby right in front of her, and she'd be licking on the baby. But that's what we're after. Postpartum rest pens are something that's kind of I think on Hendrik's dairy this was kind of by default a little bit, but I'm seeing them pop up on other dairies as well, and it makes some sense to me. So following parturition, the cows in the back behind the cows is where that harvesting of the colostrum was done. So we open up the gates and they do just a simple walk across the alley there into this postpartum rest pen. And why is that, Hendrik?
So our parlor is about a quarter mile away from there. So to really walk the cows there wasn't really an option. I didn't have any room to build that barn close to the parlor. And looking back, I'm just glad we put it where we put it. So now we transferred cows twice a day in the AM and in the PM from this pen, the postpartum pen, to the fresh cow pen or fresh heifer pen. There's two different pens again. And if there's an animal that's maybe not quite up to that yet, we can leave her there overnight. They got feed that is fed to fresh cows, or they have fresh feed there in front of them. And it's just another spot for them to relax and just to get used to the fact that they just delivered a baby or a calf and just to chill, I guess. It's the rest is everything for that the first 48 hours or 24 hours for sure. So, and we're not worried. I think when I was a younger dairyman, I wanted to get that cow milked as quick as I can. Now I'm kind of, well, if it's 24 hours, I don't think that's the end of the world either. You know, she has to stay there a little longer just so she gets her legs under her a bit stronger. Then better there than down in the stall, you know, in the next barn. So, yeah, this works really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's critical. If you think about the postpartum, so sometimes I think back now on how we've always become tradition on throwing these fresh cows, right into a fresh pen, let's say, and they're right in the mainstream. But even if it can be a few hours in a pen like this is that same pen is divided into two pens. Actually, we got again more swing gates, a simple locking device. So if we needed to treat something, if something goes down, they got good footing. Airlight water. Remember, airlight water, feed, rest, and space. It's critical. So they have to have fresh TMR in front of them and nice, clean water, and just left alone. Again, just the walkway. So that's the calving pen, and they walked across the alley into this postpartum pen. We're gonna, in the name of time, we're gonna scoot through some of these newborn facilities because I want to talk a little bit about the fresh cows. So the nursery was designed just to be a drying area for the calves. So these areas have to be really clean. Attention to ventilation. So as we all know, moisture in these pens and air can be a problem. So water gives bacteria wheels. So these have to be really, really spotless and really well maintained. Then they go from that warming shed into what's called the preschool. And inside of there are just individual cubicles, basically for the caregivers to just make sure that these baby calves are, getting used to that first, typically, a couple, 3 days.
Yeah, as soon as they can drink out of a bottle, but we bottle feed all our calves, even in the hutches later on, all the way up to when they get weaned. So as soon as a heifer calf is able to drink without help, they get moved out of there. They get a wash clothesline clip on top of that bar, and then the night crew knows that they gotta get moved to the hutches out back. Bull calves that we sell, we keep some, but bull calves that get sold stay in there. They get picked up like 4 times a week, so they never leave the preschool. Yeah.
More preschool. Got a handy little transport for back to the hutches.
Right. Yeah, the crate we call it, so it holds about 10 calves. So when we move calves from the preschool to the hutches, or from the hutches after they get weaned to the straw barns, the transition barns for calves, they go in that crate that goes in the front of a loader, and there's a little headlock on the side. Even if maybe one needed some attention or a new ear tag or whatever, you can actually put them in a little headlock and deal with it there. But yeah, works good. Yeah, local welding shop.
Make chores easy.
Yeah.
So the Young Stock program, no different than any other program on your dairy, whether it's your dirt farming community or whether it's your milking crew, your repro crew, but it's all teamwork. And this just happens to have Michigan State in there.
Wow.
We were the only Big Ten school to make it to the Sweet 16, but we won't go any further there. Hendrik's has devised some engineering there, some cool.
Yep, bottle washers. I knew we've used pails a long time in hutches to feed calves from pails. We always struggle a little bit with getting calves to drink out of the pail in a timely fashion, and then especially in the summertime, the pails would get pretty dirty with milk collected, and then you probably should go in and bring the buckets all in maybe once a week and get them all. It just became labor intensive, and we thought, well, what if we go back to bottles? But then we knew there that if you don't wash the bottles right, you're gonna have trouble. And that's when we have trouble with calves, we typically just go here and something is up with on the cleaning side of things, whether it's not taking soap or whether somewhere on the colostrum harvesting something is not good. Or that mixing vat is not cleaning well. That's where we look. But bottles, I think that bottle washer is critical. If you want to wash bottles, I think you need to have that, because to expect people to go do that with brushes, it's not going to happen. So we actually have a milk line CIP system hooked up to this tank, but also to that bottle washer that you just saw. So it just goes through cycles like your milk pipeline in the milking parlor does. It take pre-rinse, main wash, and then acid wash at the end, and then it actually sanitizes like a half an hour before the guys start feeding calves. It'll sanitize the system, and that really has helped us greatly with animal health, calf health. So yeah, that was all part of when we built that barn. That's in the front corner of that barn. We feed milk replacer. We don't feed pasteurized milk. For various reasons. We won't go into that, but yeah, just so you know.
Yep. So cleanliness on the milk feeding, obviously, as everyone is aware, listening, it's crucial. It's a game changer, really. And again, we won't spend too much time on this in lieu of the time, but monitoring stuff. So this clipboard here is just they monitor the temperature of the milk replacer as it's being fed and being mixed. So temperature control is important. There's a treatment board there that all the caregivers can keep track on which calves are what and what they need. There's a treatment log there for treatments on calves and number of treatments. And so we reach to where on some of these animals, if they've received, let's say, third treatment on respiratory disease, as an example, they may not receive anymore. But also, it gives us to look at that log. It gives people like myself a chance to look at that and see, are there any trends coming on here that are out of the normal. This is the office there, and this is all the same facility that we've seen from the outside. So having a really nice transition office for both the calf people and the cow people that are doing that, it just makes life nice. And being tidy and clean, it's all important. There's the team that were there the day I took the pictures, and there's obviously a much bigger team, but teams are important, as you all know. So we look at cows and we treat cows, but we look at these folks and we listen and we learn from each other. And so having people that are on the dairies that, number one, like to be on the dairy, and that means enjoying being around cattle and calves. It's crazy. If we try putting people in the wrong spot, in the wrong time, it just won't go well. But having people that are engaged, that want to do well, is important.
Right. So the gentleman on the left side of the picture has been with us for 11 years. The lady, Eliza, in the center has been with us for 8 years, and then Lily's been with us for 3 years. And we have multiple guys or ladies like that have been with us for a long time. And that's just, for me, that's just good, nice to see. Just makes me feel good. And they so as farm owners, I think I'm talking to a few, they want to be around cattle, but they also want to be around an employee that knows that you got their back, so you might not always feel like being the nice guy, but you're going to have to, they have a life as well. And you got to put yourselves in their shoes. your work still has to be done. But if you're a hard person to be around, then your employee retention will reflect that. So just as a little advice, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot to the statement that Hendrik just made, and it's all people, as we know. It's just all people, and we all like to be treated as people that are trying to do our job the best. So there's a lot there, but it is crazy important on the farm. And again, Eliza, she's kind of my cowgirl there. When she comes to see me at the end of her checks, usually she's got a really good question or has something novel for me to poke at. But not every cow is a pet cow, but this is her pet cow, and she wanted to make sure when I was taking my pictures that I got a picture of this pet cow of hers. So it's okay for people to have a few pet cows. It shows me that they really enjoy what they do. Fresh cow monitoring with Cow Manager, and again, we don't have a ton of time left, but I wanted Hendrik to just give some thoughts on how he adopted that.
We've got it for I think 5 years now, or we were one of the earliest one I think in our area to get it, and it really helped us. I more so actually bought it for fresh cow management than heat detection, but obviously it does great at heat detection as well. But the fresh cow management, it really streamlined that. Before, all our fresh cows would go through the rail, and we would temp them and sleeve the 3 days of milk and the 7 days of milk cows, if I remember it right. So cows they were gone from their pen too long, and all of them, and so the healthy ones and the ones that needed attention. So now we really, with this tag in their ear, we just pull out. Let's say our fresh cow group is about 90 cows in there, or 80. We pull maybe 3 or 4 cows out of there in the morning that showed up on this report, and they get attention, and the rest is not gone from the pen for more than half an hour to get milk, and they go back, and we don't bother them. So we just look at the ones that need to be looked at. And it has been a great tool for us. It works. It just works. And there's other systems. I'm not promoting this one. This one works good for us. And but there's other systems. There's definitely, and you can there again you can put protocols to it. So your training of your people becomes a lot simpler, because you tell them, like, if this shows up on Cow Manager, we pump them or we get her out of the pen and sleeve them first, see what's going on. But you don't necessarily have to be like a super cow guy to be able to be a herdsman anymore. You can kind of train people with tools like this. It makes it a little easier for us to train people to become herdsmen. Before, you were always looking for like a man or a lady that either had a farm or was a son of a farmer because they knew cows. But now this kind of helped with that greatly.
No, I would agree. As a veterinarian has been doing it for a long time, I was skeptical at first on how they would be able to detect some of these early onset diseases, but I'm here to tell you these systems do work. And by getting that cow in and out of the parlor in a timely fashion, and discontinuing a lot of what I now consider maybe unnecessary screening at the level of self-locks or at the rail, has done a lot of positive things for a lot of herds. This is a look into the fresh cow barn. Then on the right were cows, and they're being up to the parlor milking now. On the left are fresh heifers.
Yeah.
So they are separate. And then as we kind of finish this thing up, we're talking about metrics a little bit, and nothing here that's new to any of you, but the metrics for postpartum disease are crazy costly. So about $300 plus or minus. I always use that number because it hits most of them pretty close of a single event. So whether it's metritis, DA, milk fever, RP, pneumonia, mastitis, pretty much plus or minus $300. And they're additive, so you can know most of our diseases in the U.S., our transition diseases are, in fact, a combination event. Cow starts out with an RP, goes to metritis, gets a DA at 10 days. So you can see that the bill builds fast. And just a quick look, and don't look at the numbers, but the numbers here, this is the last 12 months at Deluur Dairy, and we had a death loss of 5.5%. I think NOMS data nationally is around 7 or 8% on dairies in the U.S. So we're pretty good there. Milk fever, less than 1%. Metritis, 2 or 3%. DMBs, Hendrik mentioned about that. We have about 11%, but they're DMB'd for a good reason. They're not DMB'd for poor reasons. RPs, DAs, 7 DAs recorded here on the year for 3,500 calvings. It's not too shabby. So again, just to summarize somewhat as we kind of close shop here, but to summarize some of these, and these slides were presented by Dr. Jesse Goff at the Great Lakes Dairy Conference here just a month or so ago. Again, outstanding researchers and colleagues through the years from various institutions and areas, but we've come to some of these conclusions. Moving cows is a big thing. You know, bunk space, we've talked about that. Stocking density, fresh feed, days in the close-up pen. It's important. You know, 195-pound increase, more milk for each day of cows were in close-up pen up to day 18. So these short-stay pens are very, very costly. 261 pounds for each day heifers were in close-up pens up to 28 days. So heifers need a little longer time in this transition time. They seem to do a little bit better with a little longer time. Part of that might be social, part might be new facilities. All of that's important. And these short day durations are moving into calving pens with these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. They can be deadly. So again, Jesse presented this graph, but no big surprise. It shouldn't be a big surprise to us. Overcrowded herds, particularly during transition times and close-up pens, they're killers. So back to my old classic cow signals, eupdresion, air, light, water, feed, rest, and space. If we can do it, and we can do it in our modern confinement housing, we can replace the pasture, because we have to replace the pasture, but so much of it is space and rest. Focus on what you're doing best with the transition cows and build your team. The future of your herd, your farm, your family. This is good stuff, folks. I get pretty excited about it, talking about it, and I know we've run just a few minutes late, but like most of my field trips, I'll schedule 4 or 5 or 6 farm visits on that day, and we hardly get a chance to eat the ice cream when we get back on the bus. But hopefully we've hit on something that maybe you can use in your farm. That's a look in March, February. This is some of the rest of Hendrik's facilities. His cow barns to the right, and then behind a bunch of the hutches and the transition barns. This is my family. My grandkids, actually, I was able to get the parents of these kids out of the way so that Mimi and Papa could take the picture. But it's all the next generation, folks, and it's all family. So do what you can to enjoy them. Every day is a gift that God's given us. I'm so blessed to be surrounded by family.
Well, there's my family. We came to the U.S. with 3 kids, born on the other side of the pond, and then we had 7 more. And you'll see me in the picture. My mom with the pink shirt is next to me. She came over to visit. She still lives in the Netherlands. There's a couple of grandkids in there. I think meanwhile we had 2 more. There's 4 in there. A couple of son-in-law, daughter-in-law. Yeah, as Mark said, God has been really good to us. I didn't know the Lord when I came to the U.S., and this is our promised land. I became a believer here, and really have enjoyed the people that I've met along the way that on this journey that we're on, and I'm just looking forward to who else we're gonna be encountering, I guess. But like Mark said, to God be the glory, and we thank you all for listening to us today.
Yep, it's been super fun. This is a picture at where my daughter lives, actually, and my question is it sunrise or sunset? So sometimes we get up in the morning and we have the ability to take a picture on our phones, whether it's sunrise or sunset. I won't give you the answer, but we have a lot of beauty around us. And just thank you. I want to thank Hendrik. It's a wonderful day here in Michigan, and there's certainly things that he could have had. I know he's pouring cement on one of his facilities as we speak, and so he's an awesome engineer and a cement guy. So I give Hendrik a lot of thanks for helping out with this and letting me do it, and Abby for the invite as well. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hendrik and Dr. Fox. If you can mute your computer. There you go. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all that you have learned about transition cow care. I think you shared a lot of insight that other people will be able to put into practice. So really appreciate you opening up the doors to the dairy, showing those pictures and sharing what you do there. This webinar will be posted on our website later this week. If you'd like to rewatch it or share it with somebody else, just look for it at our hordes.com website, and there is a webinar tab there that has all of our archived webinars. If you'll click ahead one slide, want to invite you quickly to our future webinars. We have a webinar every Monday, every month, the second Monday. In May, we'll have a presentation talking about managing robotic milking systems and how you can do that successfully with a presenter named Trevor DeVries from the University of Guelph. And then in June, we'll have a presentation by Lily Edwards Calloway from Colorado State University, and she'll be talking about dairy cow culling. So we hope that you will join us for one or both of those presentations. Now, we did have some questions that came in, so if you'll move the slide ahead one more, I'm going to go through these questions fairly quickly and ask you guys for a little bit more insight. So the first question here, how come you don't have headlocks in that dry cow, kind of steam up cow barn?
We don't have headlocks other than at our heifer facility. We didn't really see any need for them as far as like group treatments or being able to. I wouldn't know why I would want to headlock them. I guess I think that the feed rails, the way they are, if cows need to get out of the way because a boss cow comes around, they're a lot less stressed to just walk back, and they won't knock their head on the bars. And again, I think if you walk into a headlock barn, you'll hear a lot of noise. You'll hear clink, and it's not bad noise, but it's just noise. And yeah, it wasn't really a need for us. The only time we have to pull that cow is when we see her feet sticking from the calf, and that's when we get her up and put her in the straw pen. So if that answers the question.
We don't have any management that goes on. Once they enter that pre-fresh pens, right, we don't do any immunizations or vaccinations. There's no more treatment that we want to do on that cow at all until she's harvested colostrum. So we don't need it from a restraint handling part.
Okay, that makes sense. Are there any key differences in transition cow care for first lactation cows versus older cows? I don't know if there's one or two things that you do differently that you want to share.
I'm not sure if that was one of the protocols. I believe if a cow is third lactation plus, we do give them if that's what you're asking me, we do give them a preventative IV of calcium 23%, just to make sure they don't go down on us. And we have had very few milk fevers. I'm trying to think of what else there would be. That is about it, I think.
Very good. Do you acidify the ration for close-up cows?
Yes, the ration is acidified. Terry Novus obviously does the work there, but it is acidified. It wouldn't be over the top. It would be, again, following Dr. Goff's recommendations, and we've had good success with it clinically and in the field. So it is acidified, and those numbers all have to be just about right. So urine pH is in that 6 to 6.2 range. If we over-acidify, we know it can create problems with dry matter intakes and subsequent ketosis and issues on the fresh cow. So yes, the diet is acidified. The heifer diet is not.
Very good. If anyone is interested in a copy of the handouts, you can find that in the chat section. There is a link there if you want to be able to print this out just so you can see these pictures again. That is where you'll find it. Let me see here. Someone wants to know, how do you clean the calving pens out? How are those gates? How is that system set up?
So that's probably one thing you want to do right when you design them. You want to make sure we clean them out with a smaller payloader, or if you had a decent sized skid steer, you could clean them out and make sure you have a surface where you can push up against, so you can. There again, the least I think hand labor you have, the better it'll get done. So once a week, am I saying that right? Once a week, depending a little bit on calving pressure, they get cleaned out mechanically with a loader, and then they get rebedded. We throw lime down. Same thing with the nursery, I think we call it in the pictures. We go in there with a loader, scoop it out, and throw lime down. As you could see, we don't go in there with high pressure washes every time. It's just not feasible time-wise to get that done. So we try to clean them as often as we can, and then just use lime as a means to kill bacteria.
All right, thank you. And a person here is sharing, it said that they have installed the high volume, low speed, those larger fans, and they said they work well for them. They were just curious why, if you considered those for your barn, since in the pictures you could see that you had many smaller fans. Did you consider going with the high volume, low speed fans for that facility?
Yeah, maybe if I did, maybe this is 5-6 years ago. Maybe would do it different now. I wonder. They're a 60 and they're a 5 foot. They're not that small. They might look small. They're not that small. There's a ton of them. So it might make sense to go a different route today. So yeah, I'm not saying this is all perfect and copy everything we showed you today. So yeah, I would definitely consider other options today with what we know now, I guess. Yeah.
Very good. And this will be our last question here, a little more calf focused, but if you're testing colostrum, or if you don't have enough colostrum, do you use any colostrum replacer, or like add any colostrum supplements to your fresh colostrum?
We used to, and anymore we freeze colostrum from previous cows, and there's typically enough cows calving that it'd be very rare to not have colostrum available. So we don't, because and right now it's not so bad, but I remember like 2 years ago, calves were about worth $30, and the colostrum replacer is $30. So if you're gonna, it's all, there's economics at play that we just decided not to use that colostrum replacer anymore. So like I said, typically there's enough colostrum available, or a cow is going to calf soon. Like there's typically more than one in the pen. So if this cow didn't give you enough colostrum and you don't have any in the freezer, which is rare, then probably an hour from now you'll have colostrum from the next cow that is calving, and it does get tested, correct?
So yeah, Eliza and the group use a colostrometer, so they do grade the colostrum, and then we kind of routinely try to monitor passive transfer through serum protein testing in that first week of life. So it's easy to done. It gives you a great handle on how the whole colostrum delivery, absorption, and all that quality is taking place. So it's easy monitoring tool, and if that's broken, the calves will typically be broken following.
Very true. Thank you for that explanation. And with that, we've wrapped up the question and answer section. And I want to thank you, both Hendrik and Dr. Mark, for answering the questions. And then, a big thank you for this great presentation. I'd also like to thank my teammate Patty for all her work in promoting and producing the webinars. And of course, I want to thank all of you in the audience for joining us today. Really hope that you enjoyed this opportunity to gain some real-world dairy insight from our duo of speakers. We appreciate you making time to join us for another one of our webinars, and we hope to see you tuning in again in the future. Until next time, goodbye from all of us here at Hordes Dairyman, and take care.